Democratic Republic of Congo expels United Nations spokesperson. The World Health Organization raises alarm on the health needs of over 80 million people in the Greater Horn of Africa. Plus, protesters demonstrate outside court in Johannesburg. Over 80 undocumented illegal miners called Zama Zama appear in court for a second time. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Tenyola Shoboale. The Democratic Republic of Congo has expelled the spokesperson of the UN peacekeeping force in the country. The Foreign Ministry accused Matthias Gilman of making indelicate and inappropriate statements. Last week, the UN force, known as MONUSCO, became the focus of violent protests in eastern DRC. About 30 people, including 4 UN peacekeepers and police personnel, died during the protest. The demonstrators complained that the UN mission had failed to halt a resurgence of violence by rebels. Meanwhile, a government spokesperson in the Democratic Republic of Congo has suggested that the withdrawal of UN peacekeepers from the country could be brought forward. The plan is to have MONUSCO withdraw by the end of 2024, but the DRC government spokesperson Patrick Muyaya says after a technical meeting, the government will see if it will be possible to do the withdrawal earlier than the end of 2024. In the meantime, due to insufficient funding, the UN Refugee Agency says it's unable to adequately respond to the rising humanitarian needs of refugees and internally displaced people in the Democratic Republic of Congo. As a result, the UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, is appealing for urgent funding for its operations in the DRC.
The United Nations Refugee Agency, UNHCR, says without fresh funding, vital programs are likely to be cut, affecting education, health services, shelter and other life-saving services in the Democratic Republic of Congo. At least 5.6 million people are displaced inside DRC, Africa's largest internal displacement situation. The country also hosts 500,000 refugees, mainly from Burundi, the Central African Republic, Rwanda, and South Sudan.
When we reached here, we were confronted by many hardships. We've suffered a lot. You wake up in the morning to do casual work, like fetching water for people, digging the gardens, and doing laundry for them. Sometimes you work the whole day and the person pays you peanuts that cannot even help you improve your livelihood and provide for your children. We really have suffered a lot.
While humanitarian needs are rising daily, UNHCR's funding is only half what it was last year. The country is among the most underfunded UNHCR operations worldwide. Therefore, the agency is appealing for urgent funding for its operations. Only 19% of the $225 million budgeted at the start of the year has been secured.
We simply can't forget the people of the Democratic Republic of Congo. It's one of the most underfunded situations in the world, actually the 5th underfunded, and it just means that we're not able to provide the displaced populations, the populations that have had to flee violence and conflict, with shelter, with food in some cases, with water, and with the protection and the safety that they need and that they deserve.
This has real implications for the lives of those forced to flee. During a visit to DRC's Ituri province between 25th and 28th of July, UNHCR's Director for External Relations, Dominic Hyde, saw firsthand the strength in the face of the horror demonstrated by forcibly displaced women, men and children, but also the real impacts of underfunding.
I'm shocked by the sheer unthinkable violence that has happened, that has displaced 5.6 million people across the country just because of violence. I've heard stories today of women who were raped. I've heard families who've been destroyed, all of their savings, all of their homes, everything they had, they no longer have anything.
Protection risks in the DRC are already massive. Fighting between the Congolese army and M23 in North Kivu province has displaced an additional 160,000 people since April. UNHCR supports refugees and host communities by providing shelter and implementing livelihood projects, but severe underfunding means limited services. Host communities and refugees are also under pressure as the climate crisis, extreme weather patterns impact natural resources like water and farming land.
Well, the World Health Organization is raising growing alarm over the urgent health needs that over 80 million people in the Greater Horn of Africa face. This is due to increased food insecurity, hunger and malnutrition. WHO has now launched a funding appeal for $123.7 million to carry out urgent life-saving work until December 2022. According to the WHO's Assistant Director General for Emergencies, the role of health in response to famine crisis has often been under-recognized, and a combination of increased food insecurity, hunger and malnutrition are causing a complex health emergency.
Over 80 million people in the Greater Horn of Africa are facing food insecurity, not seen in decades, as millions of people at risk of starvation. The combination of increased food insecurity, hunger, and malnutrition are causing a complex and unrecognized health emergency. It is very unfortunate that people's access to health care is more restricted because they are on the move in search of food, water, pressure, and they may also have to make hard choices like between buying food and going to see a doctor.
The big problem we are having at this moment is that, contrary to previous crises, the prevention on the food security side is not being funded enough. And so normally what you do in this kind of situation is you do blanket supplementary feeding so that people don't slide further into malnutrition. And this is not being well funded at the moment. The effects on health are double. The health risks are going up, with the synergy between disease and malnutrition really making people much more vulnerable, because people who are malnourished become more easily sick, and sick people become more easily malnourished, is one thing. Then secondly, there is a real lack of clean water. So there is a much higher risk of waterborne diseases.
And as Kenya's hotly contested August 9th elections loom, analysts say the East African nation's vulnerability to violence is becoming evident. In a recent report, Kenya's National Cohesion and Integration Commission said potential for violence in this election cycle stands at about 53%. The country has a history with disputed elections, the worst being in 2007, when more than 1,000 people were killed and many others driven from their homes. For next week's election, opinion polls are predicting a tight race between veteran opposition leader Raila Odinga and serving Deputy President William Ruto. Ruto and Odinga were political allies during the disastrous 2007 elections. Incumbent President Uhuru Kenyatta, constitutionally barred from seeking a third five-year term, has backed Odinga, a veteran opposition leader, in a bid to sideline Ruto, whom he describes as unfit for office. Meanwhile, the U.S. Embassy in Kenya has warned American citizens against travel to the lakeside city of Kisumu ahead of next week's general election. In a security alert, the embassy says election-related demonstrations may occur in the western city and in some instances may turn violent. The alert says election-related demonstrations and rallies regularly take place in the run-up to the election and are likely to continue at times, blocking key intersections and causing traffic traffic jams. Deputy President William Ruto and former Prime Minister Raila Odinga are the two leading presidential candidates. Kisumu is seen as the political bedrock of Mr. Odinga. Police on Tuesday arrested 8 people in connection to hate leaflets, reportedly warning some communities to leave the area where Mr. Ruto is popular. Kenyans will be voting for a new president, 47 county governors and senators, members of parliament and local area lawmakers. Joining us now is Cyrus Ombati, Kenyan journalist. Thank you so much for joining us on Network Africa.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. So day by day, Kenyans are inching closer to the D-Day of choosing a new president and, of course, electing other officials. How's preparations going?
Well, today was the last day by the electoral body to collect kind of electoral materials from the airport, which were arriving from Greece. And they say they are ready to handle the exercise next week on Tuesday. So far, even security agencies say they are ready to kind of manage the security issues which are being raised here and there. And I can say everything is now set for the elections.
But we also have to remember that Kenya has a history with disputed elections, remembering the hotly contested 2007 election that saw the deaths of many. The National Cohesion and Integration Commission is reporting a 53% potential for violence in this election cycle. What's the atmosphere in the country with regards to this, and what plans have been put in place to avert violence?
Well, I tend to dispute the notion by the Commission, National Cohesion and Integration Commission, because as compared to the past incidents, past elections like 2007, 2013, 2017, currently, as of now, the country is very calm. I mean, as compared to what happened last time, or rather, you could be seeing protests now, you could be seeing tension in the country. But now, as it stands, the country is so peaceful, I can tell you for sure. You can travel from here to any part of the country. There's no tribal clashes related to elections in any way in any part of the country. Because as it was in the past, as we have realized, some of those violence incidents were instigated by the state. But now, I mean, I can tell you that things are calm. There's no comparison as it is in the past. It's calm now.
Let's talk about Kisumu then. We also have the U.S. Embassy in Kenya warning its citizens against travel to the lakeside city, which we know is seen as the political bedrock of Mr. Odinga. Speak to us a bit more about that.
It's true. I mean, they issued earlier on an alert, and then they have issued a correction, which I've shared with your guys there, because they are saying they have a CDC center in Kisumu, whereby they have their own staff, many of them almost hundreds. So they are saying it's a kind of a ritual by the U.S. State Department to issue an alert whenever there's such kind of an exercise. They said again that there's no intelligence on insecurity in the area. So it was for more of a correction on what they had issued earlier on, because even the government asked, I mean, why are you issuing such an alert? Because we are not aware of any tension in the area. These are bedrock of Mr. Odinga, yes, and given the projections which have been given here and there, he seems to be ahead of his main competitor. So the embassy had to issue a kind of a correction on the same which they had issued earlier on, saying they did that as a precautionary to their citizens who are in Kisumu to be just cautious, as it has been in the past.
Well, Cyrus, this will definitely be quite an interesting election, as we have former allies Ruto and Odinga pitted against each other, with incumbent President Kenyatta backing Odinga, his former opposition and not his own vice. How are the major presidential candidates faring with their campaigns and strategies?
Actually, when you look at the opinion polls which are coming out, you find that Mr. Odinga and Mr. Ruto are the ones taking the bigger number of, or rather the percentage of what they are likely to win. There are 4 presidential candidates in the race, and the other 2 are remaining. They are performing poorly. You can say 2 or 3% of the total number of the votes to be cast. So to say, I will not be wrong to say that they're insignificant in one way or the other. The main now contenders are Mr. Odinga and Mr. Ruto. Now it's an issue of now time to see who's going to win next week.
All right, look ahead to Cyrus Mbachi, Kenyan journalist. Thank you so much for your thoughts on the program. And still ahead on Network Africa. Nigeria's Chioma Onyekwere makes history as first Nigerian woman to win the discus throw gold medal at the Commonwealth Games. More details in a moment. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Hundreds of protesters belonging to different political and civil rights groups demonstrated outside the Krugersdorp Magistrate Court in Johannesburg as over 80 undocumented illegal miners called Zama Zama appeared in court today. This is their second court appearance this week. The 80 suspects were arrested over the weekend after 8 women were brutally gang-raped on a set to shoot a music video last Thursday. The charges against them for now include violating South Africa's immigration laws and being in possession of illegal firearms. The case has been postponed to the 10th of August 2022, and DNA tests to determine whether the 80 suspects are linked to the rape of 8 women is still in process. Our South Africa Bureau Chief, Betty Dibia, has more.
The crowd outside the Krugersdorp Magistrates Court in Johannesburg this Wednesday made Mondays look like child's play. Even die-hard opposition parties spoke from the same place of pain.
We would not have a problem with foreign nationals who are legally in the country to be here and conduct trade. We've got an issue with illegal immigrants who come to the country and conduct illegal activities, including crime, killing people, raping our children and sisters. If we do not stand up as men and women, as people who love this country, our sovereignty is going to be undermined and compromised.
We are clear that bail must not be given to them, and we want them to face the might rule of the law.
As the EFF, we are here because we want to display a message that we strongly condemn this barbaric act that was done by the Zama Zamas. And at the end of the day, we expect to see the law really taking this seriously, because there have been plenty of other incidents and the perpetrators always get away and unable to come back to South Africa.
Many pushed to make their way into an already overcrowded courtroom, which couldn't even fit all the 80 suspects facing charges of illegal immigration for now. No cameras were allowed in, and the case was postponed to the 10th of August. The protesters outside the court sustained their calls for justice following the brutal gang rape of 8 women involved in a music video shoot near a mine dump last week. The 22-member cast and crew were also robbed.
We're so insulted by this thing happening here, because as women, we are being killed, we are being raped by these guys, so they need to rot in jail.
We are experiencing a lot of crime from these guys. They've got like guns, weapons that you can name them, illegally in our country. We must say they must stop. This must stop. Our government must do something about them. Please, we are asking humbly.
The Gauteng Provincial Police Commissioner Elias Mawela has appealed to the public to be patient and give forensic officials time to conclude DNA testing and matching of suspects before the case of rape can be separated from the illegal immigration charges. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Betty Dibia, Channels Television News.
The UN mission in South Sudan says conflict-related sexual violence is on the rise in the country as fighting in the country eases. In a report, UNMISS says there was a 218% increase in rape and gang rape between April and June. The head of the mission, Nicholas Haysom, adds that this surge in sexual and gender-based violence is completely unacceptable, impacting most severely on the women and girls. Intercommunal conflict continues to dominate civilian casualties, followed by clashes between militias backed by government factions. The release of the report coincided with the arrival arrival of 3 experts from the UN's Commission on Human Rights in South Sudan. They are to meet government officials, civil society representatives and diplomats to discuss the findings in the report. The U.S. representative to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, has said that her planned visit to the continent later this week is to get first-hand information on the impact of the global food crisis and how to partner with Africa to address the problems. She'll be visiting markets, food production facilities, and meeting with local farmers to understand and help Africa harness its own resources. She will be visiting Ghana, Uganda, and Cape Verde. Ambassador Thomas-Greenfield said that discussions with President Nana Akufo-Addo of Ghana and Yoweri Museveni of Uganda will also focus on regional security, corruption, and human rights. The United States has urged Ethiopia to allow unrestricted access to fuel in Tigray region in order for emergency aid to be distributed to areas low on food. It tweeted pictures that showed warehouses full of bags of grain that it says cannot be distributed because of fuel shortages. The U.S. Embassy in Ethiopia said all the emergency food is ready to be distributed by Catholic Relief to Ethiopians in need in the Tigray region, but humanitarians are waiting for incoming fuel to transport it. Ethiopia has previously termed claims of fuel shortage in Tigray a myth. Special envoys from the EU and US are in the city of Mekelle, capital of Tigray, as part of international efforts to see a peaceful resolution to the 21-month-old civil war. In a bid to curb the spread of HIV, a clinic in Dakar is offering a substitution maintenance therapy to people who are drug addicts. With the management of opioid dependence, citizens who replace illicit drug with medically prescribed ones can now get the orientation and health care they need.
To reduce the spread of HIV, a drop-in clinic in Dakar offers free opioid substitution to people who inject drugs. Sepiad is one of the first harm reduction centers in Senegal. It has 250 people enrolled in its opioid substitution therapy program. Founded in 2014, the center has cared for more than 1,000 people. Aside from syringe exchange, opioid substitution, and psychosocial support, Sepiad offers health care. The aim is to reduce the spread of HIV among people who inject drugs.
I am here to take my treatment, and I am a tailor.
More than 3/4 of patients are men, but Sepiad has been working hard to enroll more women who are more likely to live with HIV. Mariama Bathiam is a former drug user living on the streets for years. She's now a peer educator at Sepiad. She's worried about rising drug consumption among young people and dwindling funds.
I go out into the community and visit my peers to raise awareness about getting off drugs and reducing health risks. So I refer them to Sepiad, and they can, like me, stop drugs.
The center encourages patients to learn a trade. Drug use is a criminal offense in Senegal, but Sepiad has the government support in various international organizations like UNAIDS and the Global Fund.
Ultimately, ending AIDS would cost much less money than not ending AIDS. Importantly, the actions needed to end AIDS are also key for overcoming other pandemics.
According to a report by UNAIDS, globally, more than 1.5 million people became infected with HIV last year. The number of people on HIV treatment grew more slowly in 2021 than in over a decade. The gap in HIV treatment coverage between children and adults is increasing rather than narrowing.
Zimbabweans are desperate for survival as the cost of living soars, piling pressure on a population already facing food shortages and high unemployment, and stirring memories of economic chaos years ago under the late leader Robert Mugabe's near 4-decade rule. Shepherd Shawe is among desperate citizens selling scrap metal for survival in a poor settlement about 15 kilometers west of Zimbabwe's capital, Harare.
It's 11 a.m. and Shepherd Chowi has arrived at a scrap yard where dozens of other metal pickers await to sell their wares. For 2 sacks, Chowi gets paid $6. Chowi has a cart filled with tins, iron rods and other metallic objects that he collected in Hopley, a poor settlement about 15 kilometers west of Zimbabwe's capital, Harare.
I start moving around the township at 8 a.m. when people are awake. My job entails asking people to sell their scrap metal or anything metallic they are not using anymore. We always negotiate the price before coming here to sell. I can take care of my family through the business. I get $40 per day or less. Although it is tough, I can provide for them. Scrap metal has given us hope.
Chowi is among Zimbabweans selling scrap metal for survival as the cost of living soars, piling pressure on a population already facing food shortages and high unemployment, stirring memories of economic chaos years ago under veteran leader Robert Mugabe's near 4-decade rule. Annual inflation, which hit 256.9% in July, has cast a shadow over President Emmerson Mnangagwa's bid to revitalize the economy. By selling scrap metal, Chowi can afford to pay rent, buy food, and pay school fees for his 2 daughters. Zimbabwe's steel industry has been struggling since the collapse of the Zimbabwe Iron and Steel Company more than a decade ago. However, in recent years, small steel producers working with scrapyard dealers are picking up the pieces.
These metal pickers help the steel industry which we supply. Sometimes they lack money to pay us, but the metal is always available. I've been supplying steel makers for years now.
Especially steelmakers.
The scrap metal trade is not illegal in Zimbabwe, but has raised concerns about vandalism of infrastructure, including that of state-owned National Railways of Zimbabwe, which has called for the trade to be regulated. Zimbabwe used to be one of the Southern Africa's biggest steel producers. A return to more reliable steel output and its potential associate economic benefits, as well as the creation of jobs in the industry, could provide a stability that may steady the rush for scrap metals. However, with an increasing number of people making their livelihood in scrap collection, the situation will also require careful management.
And Nigeria's Chioma Onyekwere has made history as the first Nigerian woman to win the discus throw gold medal at the Commonwealth Games. Making her debut at the Games, the 28-year-old, who is also the African Games and African Athletics champion, threw her season's best of 61.70 meters in her 4th attempt to snatch the lead from Britain's Jade Lally. Her compatriot, Obiageri Amechi, won bronze medal with a throw of 56.99 meters. The 2 medals are the first ones for Nigeria in this year's Games. Congratulations to them. And that's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Tenny Olashoboale. Bye for now.